Good morning, students. Today we are going to continue with our class of BA Part 2 English Literature, and this lecture today is on Paper 2 and Section B, where we are going to talk about the prose essays. And the title for today's essay is Making Writing Simple by J.B. Priestley, born in 1894 and died in 1984. And this essay talks about uh, the essay's views about what makes writing appealable to all. And here his argument is put forward in a very argumentative way. And he says that we may speak in a language which may be little uh, complicated, but when it comes to writing, it should be such that everybody understands it very clearly. So let us begin the chapter. At the end of a long talk with a youngish critic, a sincere fellow whose personality, though not his values, I respect, he stared at me and then slowly said, I don't understand you. Your talk is so much complicated, subtle, than your writing. Your writing always seems to me too simple. And I replied, but I have spent years trying to make my writing simple. What you see as a fault, I regard as a virtue. So here the writer is trying to put forward this conversation with a young critic, and the conversation is about the difference between the writing style of J.B. Priestley on the way he speaks and the way he writes, and the critic has a comment to make on it. There was now revealed to us the gulf between his generation and mine. He and his lot matured in the early 30s means the 1930s, wanted literature to be difficult. They grew up in revolt against the mass communication antics of their age. They did not want to share anything with the crowd. Writing that was hard to understand was like a password to their secret society. A good writer to them was one who made his readers toil and sweat. What does that mean? A writer, if he writes very simply and the readers understand it at once, does not leave that writer in awe of others, and so his value falls according to the writers of the early 1930s, as per Priestley's remarks here. And they admired extreme cleverness and solemnity, poets like political cardinals, critics who came to literature like specialists summoned to consultation at a king's beside. So the role of the critic became very important because the writings became very typical, and it was not easy for a layman, not a person involved too much in the literary critical appreciation, to grasp the text. A genuine author, an artist, as distinct from hacks who tried to please the mob, began with some simple thoughts and impression, and then proceeded to complicate his account of them, if only to keep away the fools. So, according to this view, an author or an artist may begin something with a simple thought, but in order to let only the intellectuals understand, he would make it more complicated. Difficulty was demanded, hence the vogue to Donne and Hopkins. Literature had to respond to something twisted, tormented, esoteric in their own secret natures. In all this, there was no pose, and here their elders went wrong about them. They could be accused, not unjustly, of narrowness and arrogance, but not of insincerity. They were desperately sincere in believing that the true artist must hide from the crowd behind a thicket of briars. So, this is a language itself made little complicated by the use of this similes and the metaphors which Priestley uses to convey the thought that writers were expected to be making their way of communication stranger for the normal person to understand. They grew up terrified of the crowd who, in this new mass age, seemed to them to be threatening all decent values. So, to keep a gap or difference between the general public and the artist or the writer and the intellectuals and the critics, the plea for making writing complicated was upheld. So, in this essay, we will find further how the writer gives his arguments about being in favor of making writing simple. So, we'll continue reading this chapter in our next class.